No, it can't be real. It's just the wind, the old monastery playing tricks on my tired mind. Ilara, the widowed grandmother, newly arrived at the medieval monastery she now called home, tried to convince herself. But the sound, a guttural, muffled moan, seemed to vibrate from the very belly of the earth, deep beneath her feet. Her heart pounded, a frantic drum against her fragile ribs. As she knelt, her trembling hand touching the cold, icy floor, what was hidden there? A forgotten secret, a trapped soul. She knew she had to find out, and what she was about to unearth was not just a relic, but a terror, or a salvation that would change her existence forever. The dense air of the monastery seemed to chill Ilara's bones even further. The sound, a deep lament that seemed to come from the bowels of the earth, was not imagination. Her wrinkled fingers traced the cold stones of the floor, searching for an explanation, a point of origin for that macabre melody. Fear, an icy serpent, squeezed her chest, but the image of her grandchildren's frightened little faces, Anna and Peter, floated in her mind, more potent than any terror. They were her reason, her light in the darkness of that cruel world that had abandoned them. Anna, the elder, with her 7 years and big, curious eyes, had started to shrink more into the dark corners, whispering about voices that called her when the sun set. Peter, just 5, clung to Ilara's skirt with desperate strength at every creak of the wind or shadow that danced on the walls. The grandmother saw the dread growing in them, crushing the little childish joy they still had left. She could not allow fear to consume them. She had promised herself she would protect them, no matter the cost. She rose slowly, her knee cracking with age, and walked to the small refuge they had improvised in the old chapel, where her grandchildren slept, huddled under a thin blanket. The fires they lit barely combated the biting cold that seeped through the cracks. Hunger was also a constant companion, a persistent knot in everyone's stomach. But now the threat was invisible, palpable in the air, and much more disturbing. Ilara sat beside Anna, who, even in sleep, seemed restless. The grandmother stroked the girl's fine hair, feeling her feverish forehead. It wasn't just the cold, it was fear. "Don't worry, my flower," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Grandma is here. Nothing will harm you." But even her words sounded hollow to her own ears. The guttural moan, now a little more distant but still present, seemed to mock her promise. The local belief that the monastery was haunted, something she had dismissed as peasant superstition, began to erode her own faith. But what would be worse? Ghosts or something real and tangible, hidden in the depths of those ancient stones? Ilara pressed her lips together, determination hardening her gaze. She couldn't run. There was nowhere to go. That monastery, however desolate, was the only roof over their heads. Her grandchildren depended on her. That night, as the moon silvered the ruins, Ilara mentally traced the contours of the monastery, every stone, every crack, every dark corner. She needed to investigate, not to satisfy her curiosity, but to banish the terror from her grandchildren's eyes. If something was hidden there, she would find it. And if it was a threat, she would face it. Her love for Anna and Peter was a force that surpassed her own weariness, her age, and, yes, her paralyzing fear. She took a deep breath, the icy air burning her lungs. The search would begin at dawn. The first ray of sun barely crept through the cracks of the monastery's broken windows, painting the stone floor with pale streaks of light. When Ilara rose, her bones cracked in protest, but the determination in her eyes was stronger than any pain. Her grandchildren still slept deeply, Anna with an arm thrown over Peter, as if protecting him even in sleep. The grandmother watched their serene faces for a moment, a knot tightening in her throat. It was for them, always for them. With a sigh that turned to vapor in the icy air, Ilara picked up an improvised torch made of dry branches and a piece of old cloth and lit it from the dying embers of the fire. The small flame danced, casting ghostly shadows on the tall, mouldy walls. The monastery, in the flickering light, seemed even vaster and more impenetrable. She began her search methodically, starting with the chapel where they slept, expanding into the adjacent corridors. Her footsteps echoed, breaking the heavy silence that seemed to swallow every sound. Ilara dragged her feet, examining every inch of the stone floor, every moss-covered wall. Her wrinkled fingers felt the stones, searching for any irregularity, any crack that might indicate a hidden passage. Millennia-old dust rose with every movement, irritating her throat and already tired eyes. The guttural sound, which had tormented her the previous night, seemed to have quieted with the arrival of day, but Ilara knew it was there, latent, waiting to resurface. She forced herself to ignore the cold that bit at her fingers and the exhaustion that weighed on her shoulders. With each crumbling door she passed, she felt the history of the place whisper in her ears, a mixture of devotion and abandonment. In an inner courtyard, where grass grew wild between the cracked flagstones, Ilara knelt, touching the ground with the palm of her hand. There, the air seemed denser, and a subtle, almost imperceptible vibration seemed to emanate from the earth. She closed her eyes, concentrating. It was faint, but it was there. Fear tried to creep back, but she pushed it away with the image of Anna and Peter. "Grandma." Anna's sleepy voice made her jump. The girl was at the courtyard entrance, rubbing her eyes with Peter clinging to her leg. "What are you doing?" Ilara stood up, forcing a reassuring smile. "Just exploring, my flower, trying to find a warmer spot for us." She didn't want to scare them further with the truth. "Go back by the fire, it's too cold here." Anna nodded, but her big, curious eyes followed Ilara as she turned to the oldest wall of the courtyard, where the sound seemed strongest. The grandmother felt her grandchildren's gaze on her back, a mixture of worry and dependence that propelled her. She needed to be strong. She needed to find the answer. With the torch raised, Ilara began to examine the stone wall, covered in ivy and centuries of grime. Every stone seemed identical, but she knew a secret wouldn't reveal itself easily. Her fingers, now sore and scratched, felt the crevices, searching for a lever, a fitting, anything that would indicate this was no ordinary wall. Exhaustion was overcoming her, but the promise she had made to herself and her grandchildren was a fire burning in her chest, warming her more than any bonfire. She wouldn't give up, not now. The grandmother, with the torch trembling slightly in her hand, ran her aged fingers over the cold stone, feeling the roughness of centuries of neglect. The stubborn, dense ivy covered much of the surface, hiding what might lie beneath. Anna and Peter, in silence, watched her every move, their small, pale faces reflecting the flickering light of the torch. Their gaze was both a burden and a blessing, living proof that she could not fail. Hours dragged on, turning into a full day of exhaustive searching. Ilara scraped away the ivy with her fingernails, scratched her fingers on the sharp stones, and coughed from the rising dust. The sun set again, plunging the monastery into an even deeper darkness, and with it the guttural sound returned. Stronger now, more insistent, it seemed to vibrate in the air, making the children shrink back and whimper. Ilara hugged them tightly, feeling their small bodies tremble. "It's all right, my loves. Grandma is here," she repeated, but her own voice was choked with weariness and a fear she struggled to hide. That night, sleep did not come for Ilara. She lay beside her grandchildren, listening to the sound that seemed to come from below, a deep lament that compelled her to continue. At dawn, the next day, with her skin marked by dirt and her eyes swollen from lack of rest, she was back at the wall. With every fiber of her being, she felt that the answer was there, hidden in plain sight. Hunger gnawed, the cold was excruciating, but the image of her grandchildren, whose smiles had almost disappeared, was the fuel for her tired soul. She began to tap lightly on each stone with the palm of her hand, searching for a hollow sound, a difference in resonance. Tap, tap, tap. Her arms ached, but she didn't stop. Peter, braver that day, brought a small stone from the ground and began to imitate his grandmother, tapping on the lower parts of the wall. Anna, sitting a little apart, drew imaginary figures in the dust with a twig, but her eyes never left Ilara. Suddenly, a different sound, not a hollow tap, but a muffled clunk, as if a part of the wall had moved minimally. Ilara stopped, her heart pounding. She knelt, more vigorously pushing aside the ivy and dirt that covered that section. Her fingers felt the surface, and then she felt it. A thin, almost imperceptible line, which was not a natural crack in the stone, but a joint, and right in the middle, a small indentation, obscured by centuries of dust and grime. With trembling hands, Ilara tried to push, pull, twist. Nothing. Frustration threatened to overwhelm her, but then she remembered an old story her father used to tell about secret doors in castles, which often were triggered by a specific pressure point. She pressed the indentation with her thumb, applying all the strength she had left. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a slow, heavy creak that seemed to come from the very heart of the monastery, a section of the wall began to move inward, revealing a dark, narrow opening. The air that came from within was cold and damp, laden with the smell of earth, mold, and something older, something Ilara couldn't identify. Anna and Peter approached, their eyes wide, fear and curiosity battling on their faces. The secret entrance was there, and what lay beyond it, Ilara knew, would change everything. The air emanating from the crack was an icy breath, laden with the smell of damp earth and centuries of oblivion. Ilara felt a shiver run down her spine, but it wasn't just the cold. It was the feeling of the unknown, of what lay hidden in the deep darkness beyond that opening. Anna and Peter pressed against her, their eyes wide, reflecting the trembling light of the torch. Fear was palpable, but curiosity and the need for answers were even stronger in Ilara. "Stay very close to Grandma," she whispered, her voice a little hoarse as she knelt to peer into the narrow passage. It was a low, irregular tunnel, barely lit by the torch. The walls seemed to sweat moisture, and the floor was packed earth, soft and cold. The guttural sound that had tormented them for the past few days had silenced, replaced by an oppressive, almost reverent silence. With a heavy sigh, Ilara decided there was no turning back. They had come this far, and the promise of an end to her grandchildren's terror was the only thing that mattered. She gripped the torch more firmly and with an effort began to crawl through the opening, dragging herself into the dark interior. Anna, with her childish courage, followed closely, and Peter, whimpering softly, was gently pushed by Anna, who guided him by the hand. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, a forgotten crypt, where the air seemed even heavier and older. The light from Ilara's torch danced on the stone walls, revealing empty niches and what appeared to be dark wooden shelves, almost disintegrated by time. The floor was covered by a thick layer of dust and debris, and the silence was so profound that Ilara could hear her own heart pounding in her chest. Anna and Peter huddled behind her, their small bodies trembling. "Grandma, it's dark," Peter murmured, clinging to Ilara's skirt. "Don't worry, my angels. Grandma is here," Ilara repeated, trying to infuse confidence into her voice, though her own heart was racing. She raised the torch, sweeping it across the darkness. It was then that her eyes, accustomed to the gloom, fell upon the shelves. They were not empty. There, in careful stacks, despite the dust and time, lay hundreds of volumes. Ancient manuscripts with dried leather covers and yellowed pages were piled high to the ceiling. Ilara approached, her breath caught in her throat. She touched one of the volumes with her fingertips, feeling the rough texture of the leather and the weight of history. They were not ghosts nor curses. It was knowledge, guarded for centuries. As her eyes swept over the vast collection, the torchlight revealed something more, hidden beneath a shroud of cobwebs and dust in a darker corner of the crypt. It was a chest of dark wood and rusted hardware, but which seemed strangely intact. Her heart skipped a beat. That chest, she felt, held more than just stories. With her grandchildren still clinging to her, Ilara walked slowly to the chest. With each step, dust rose in small clouds, and the smell of mold and antiquity intensified. She knelt, feeling the cold, heavy wood beneath her fingers. The hardware was corroded, but the clasp, though ancient, seemed undisturbed. Hope, a small flame, began to warm her tired chest. With trembling hands, Ilara fumbled with the clasp, searching for a mechanism, a way to open what could be the answer to her prayers and the end of her fears. A faint click echoed in the silence of the crypt. The chest was about to reveal its secrets. The soft click resonated in the crypt, a tiny sound, but one that to Ilara sounded like the unraveling of destiny. With her heart pounding, she lifted the heavy lid of the chest. A creak filled the silence, and then darkness gave way to the flickering torchlight, revealing a golden glow that made her eyes widen. Anna and Peter, curious and a little scared, peered from behind their grandmother, their small faces illuminated. Inside lay stacks of ancient gold coins, their luster dulled by time, but undeniably valuable. Among them, jewels sparkled, pearl necklaces, rings with precious stones. Ilara ran her trembling fingers over the wealth, an unreal sensation of abundance that contrasted with the misery of her life. But what truly captured her attention, nestled beneath the jewels, was a rolled-up parchment, yellowed and fragile. With reverent care, she unrolled it. It was a map, drawn with faded ink on a material that looked like animal skin, showing the contours of the monastery and its lands. Her eyes scanned the symbols and lines. There, marked with a small sun, was the indication of a spring of crystal-clear water, and further on, where a small drawing of a plant sprouted, the representation of a fertile field hidden deep within the property. It wasn't just material wealth. It was the promise of life, of sustenance, the guttural sound that had terrified them, the hunger that tormented them, the cold that froze them. All of it seemed to dissipate before that revelation. An overwhelming wave of emotion washed over Ilara. Warm tears streamed down her wrinkles, not from sadness, but from a relief so profound it made her sway. She pressed the map against her chest, feeling the ancient paper against her skin. "My angels," she whispered, her voice choked, turning to her grandchildren, who looked at her with a mixture of confusion and childish wonder at the treasure's gleam. "We have been blessed." Anna, with her big eyes, pointed to the gold. "Is it for us, Grandma?" Peter, forgetting his fear, reached out his small hand to touch a coin. Ilara smiled, a genuine smile she hadn't felt in a long time. "Yes, my loves, it's for us, it's hope, it's life." That monastery, which once seemed a tomb for her dreams, now revealed itself as a cradle of possibilities. The extinct religious order had not only left a financial treasure, but a legacy of wisdom and provision. The map was not just a piece of parchment. It was a new beginning, the seed of a prosperous future where hunger would be a distant memory and cold just a breeze. Ilara felt a renewed strength. An energy that seemed to spring from her despair transformed into faith. The overcoming of her fear, the persistence in her search, everything had been rewarded in a way she had never dared to dream. The connection with the monastery's past was palpable. She was not just saving her family, she was restoring a purpose, a legacy. With the map in one hand and the torch in the other, Ilara looked up, feeling the weight of responsibility, and the lightness of gratitude. The monastery was no longer a desolate refuge, but a sanctuary of new promises. The path ahead would be challenging, but now they had the tools, the hope, and each other. Ilara, with the map in one hand and the torch in the other, felt the weight of responsibility and the lightness of gratitude. The monastery was no longer a desolate refuge, but a sanctuary of new promises. Anna and Peter, still dazed by the gleam of the gold and jewels, looked at her, their eyes curious and full of a newborn hope. Ilara knelt, pulling them into a tight embrace, feeling their small, fragile bodies against hers. "My loves, our lives will change. We will no longer be hungry nor cold," she promised, tears still streaming, but now from pure joy. She picked up a handful of gold coins, feeling their cold, solid weight in her palm. It was real, not a feverish dream, but a tangible truth. She imagined fresh bread, warm milk, soft blankets. The image was so vivid that her stomach rumbled in protest. But the exit from the crypt was narrow and difficult, and she knew she couldn't take everything at once. She needed a plan. "Let's go back up now," she said, her voice full of new energy. "We will certainly return." Anna and Peter nodded, still fascinated by the open chest, but trusting their grandmother. As Ilara prepared to crawl back through the tunnel, her gaze swept the crypt once more, a final farewell to the darkness that had now transformed into light. It was then that she saw, not a sound, not a shadow, but a light, a soft, warm light, almost a pulse that seemed to emanate from one of the stacks of ancient manuscripts. It wasn't the reflection of the torch, for the light had a color of its own, a golden, ethereal hue that danced over the yellowed pages of one particular volume. Ilara's heart skipped a beat, not from fear, but from a reverent surprise. Anna and Peter also noticed. "Grandma, what is that?" Peter whispered, pointing with a trembling finger. Anna, more observant, frowned. "It looks like the book is glowing." Ilara approached. The torch raised, her eyes fixed on the manuscript. The light was not strong enough to blind, but unmistakable, a silent presence that seemed to call her. She reached out, hesitant, and touched the dried leather cover of the volume that radiated the glow. A current of warmth, soft and comforting, ran up her arm. It was not a threat, but an invitation. Suddenly, understanding struck her with the force of a revelation. The material treasure was a blessing, yes, a salvation from hunger and cold. But those manuscripts, they were the heart of the monastery, the voice of its history, the true legacy of the order. The guttural sound that had terrified them, she realized, was not from ghosts, but perhaps the silent lament of a place that yearned to be understood, to have its history rediscovered. The light seemed to be the answer, a form of communication, a part of the monastery's soul revealing itself now that she had shown courage and unconditional love. Ilara felt a new responsibility blossom in her chest, deeper than merely providing food and shelter. She had to understand. She had to unravel the secrets contained in those pages, not just for herself and her grandchildren, but to honor the monastery, to give voice to those who built and inhabited it. The map and the gold were the body, but the manuscripts, the soul. She turned to her grandchildren, her eyes shining with new determination. "My loves, the monastery has more to tell us, much more." She knew that the task of deciphering those ancient texts would be monumental, perhaps impossible for her, a simple, unlettered woman. But the persistent light of the manuscript was a promise, a guide. She couldn't ignore it. The path to prosperity would not be solely through gold and fertile land, but also through wisdom and the restoration of the monastery's original purpose. The turning point was not the treasure, but the understanding the true value lay in the history and legacy she now had the chance to revive. Ilara clutched the map and the handful of coins, but her eyes were fixed on the books. The journey was just beginning, and she knew it would be about much more than just survival. It would be about discovery and rebirth, not only for her family, but for the monastery itself. Ilara felt the weight of the parchment and coins in her hands, but her eyes did not stray from the book that pulsed with a soft, mysterious light. Anna and Peter, still close by, watched the scene with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. The grandmother knew the way back would be arduous, but the new flame of purpose in her chest propelled her with vigor. She needed to leave, not just with the treasure, but with the promise of knowledge. "Come, my little ones," she said, her voice firmer now. "We need to take some of these coins to buy food and blankets, but this book—" She pointed to the glowing volume. "This book will come with us, too." Carefully, Ilara picked up the manuscript. The golden light seemed to intensify in her hands, and a comforting warmth spread through her fingers. She wrapped it in a piece of fabric she found in the chest, protecting it as if it were a newborn. Then, with Anna's help, who, despite her young age, showed surprising strength and determination, she filled a small bag with the gold coins. Peter, for his part, hugged one of the brightest jewels, a pearl necklace he thought was beautiful. The return through the narrow tunnel was even more challenging with their new burdens. Ilara crawled with the wrapped book and the bag of coins, feeling the dampness and cold penetrate her bones. Anna and Peter followed closely, their small sighs echoing in the confined space. With each inch, Ilara felt the exhaustion deepen, but the vision of a better future for her grandchildren was a beacon in her mind. Finally, with a last effort, they emerged from the secret passage, back into the courtyard. The sun was already high, and the daylight seemed to dim the memory of the crypt's darkness. Ilara breathed deeply the fresh air, feeling freedom and hope. She looked at the wall, which now seemed a silent guardian of secrets, and at the monastery, which was once a ruin and now a home full of promises. The first task was the most urgent: food. With the gold coins weighing in her bag, Ilara felt a new dignity. She would no longer need to beg or worry about the next day. But the idea of leaving the monastery, even for a brief period, to go to the nearest village, brought a pang of apprehension. How would she explain the sudden wealth? Would people be kind or covetous? She decided that discretion would be her best ally. She would choose a time when the village was less busy, perhaps at dawn, to buy the essentials. But first, she needed a safe place to store the rest of the treasure and the manuscripts. The crypt, though secret, was not a place to live. With her grandchildren beside her, Ilara began to explore the monastery again, this time with a different eye, not in search of a secret entrance, but of a room that could be cleaned, warmed, and above all, safe. A place where they could begin to build their new life. She thought of the fertile fields and the water spring on the map. That would be the foundation of everything. As she walked, her eyes fell upon one of the side towers, which seemed less damaged by time. The door was stuck, but the walls were solid, and the roof, though with some cracks, seemed to hold. "There," she murmured, pointing. "There we will begin." Anna and Peter, sensing their grandmother's new determination, smiled, a spark of renewed joy on their faces. That monastery, once a place of fear, now seemed like a sleeping giant, ready to awaken with them. Ilara knew the journey would be long and challenging, but with unwavering faith and love, they would transform that place into a true home. Life was just beginning. Life was just beginning, and Ilara felt every fiber of her being vibrate with this new truth. The side tower, which once seemed just another ruin, now stood as a beacon of hope. The solid wooden door was swollen and stuck. Centuries of dampness and abandonment had sealed it. "Come, my little ones," Ilara said, her voice full of an energy she hadn't felt in a long time, a sparkle in her eyes that reflected the sunlight. "Let's open our new home." She pushed the door with all the strength she had left. Her muscles tense under her wrinkled skin, but it wouldn't budge. Peter, with his childish curiosity, tried to push too, his small shoulders against the wood, making an adorable effort. Anna, more practical and observant, frowned and noticed a crack at the bottom. "Grandma, maybe if we pull up a little bit," she suggested, pointing with her pinky finger. Ilara nodded, grateful for her granddaughter's insight. Together, they tried to lift the door, and with a long, drawn-out groan from the old wood, which seemed to complain about the movement after so long, the door finally yielded, opening into the damp darkness within. The air inside was heavy, laden with the smell of mold, dust, and the echo of forgotten times. Sunlight, timidly entering through a crack in the ceiling and a small arched window, revealed a circular room with robust stone walls and a packed earth floor covered by years of debris. Cobwebs hung like grey veils, and small piles of rubble, dry branches and loose stones lay heaped in the corners. It wasn't a home yet, but Ilara saw beyond the dirt and disorder. She saw walls that could be warmed by a fire, a space that could shelter her grandchildren safely and comfortably. With a determined sigh, Ilara placed the glowing manuscript, still wrapped in fabric, in a safe, elevated corner, away from the dirt and dampness. The bag of gold coins was carefully hidden under a loose stone near the wall, a secret kept from curious eyes. "First, we need light and fresh air," she declared, opening the door wider to let the afternoon breeze in. With Peter's help, who felt like a little hero carrying twigs, she began to push the largest pieces of rubble out. Anna, with her delicacy but also with great diligence, began to sweep the dust with a branch, creating small clouds that danced in the golden light that filled the room. The work was arduous, and weariness soon made itself felt in Ilara's bones, each movement a reminder of her age. But with every piece of dirt removed, every cobweb undone, the room seemed to breathe, coming to life. Ilara imagined a crackling fire in the center, soft blankets spread on the clean floor, the smell of fresh bread and warm milk filling the air. Her eyes shone with the vision of a future that until yesterday seemed impossible, a distant mirage. She looked at Anna and Peter, their faces smudged with dust, but their eyes full of new hope, a childish joy that warmed her heart. "We will make this place the most welcoming home in the world," she promised, and her grandchildren smiled, a genuine smile not seen in a long time, transforming the ruin into a stage of dreams. The journey to the village would be the next step, but for now, the tower was their world, and with every effort, they transformed it, stone by stone, into a refuge of love and promise. The sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, and the tower, once silent and forgotten, now resonated with the sounds of a family building their future, a future that seemed as bright as the manuscript waiting to be read. Ilara watched the sunset, feeling the night air begin to cool. The dust from the cleaning still gently hung in the tower's air, but the room already seemed less like a tomb and more like a cocoon. Anna and Peter, exhausted but with a new sparkle in their eyes, nestled close to her, little Peter still clutching the pearl necklace like a talisman. Ilara's stomach rumbled, an urgent reminder that hope, however bright, did not feed. They needed food, blankets, everything that life in the monastery did not offer. The idea of going to the village, however, brought a knot to her throat. How could a woman who barely had enough to eat until the day before suddenly appear with gold coins? Greed was a monster as real as hunger, and Ilara feared the stares, the questions, the envy. She could not risk her grandchildren's safety. "Let's rest a little, my loves," she whispered, stroking Anna's hair. "Tomorrow, before the sun rises, Grandma will go to the village. You will stay here, well hidden, and won't open the door for anyone." Anna nodded, serious, understanding the gravity of her grandmother's words. Peter, already sleepy, merely murmured a "Yes, Grandma," and leaned his head on Ilara's shoulder. She covered them with the only blanket they possessed, a thin, worn fabric, but one that offered a minimum of warmth and security. Ilara spent the night awake, the map and the glowing manuscript in her mind, the weight of the coins hidden under the stone. Every shadow in the tower seemed like a judgment, every creak of the wind a threat. But the image of her grandchildren's hungry faces was the force that propelled her. At the first sign of light on the horizon, before the sun even dared to peek from behind the mountains, Ilara rose. With her heart pounding, she took the bag of coins, choosing only a few so as not to raise suspicion. She put on her simplest, darkest clothes, trying to appear as discreet as possible. She kissed Anna and Peter's foreheads, who were still sleeping deeply. "I'll be back before you even realize I'm gone," she promised in a whisper, more to herself than to them. The walk to the village was solitary and quick. The cold, pre-dawn air bit at her skin, but determination warmed her. The narrow streets of the village were almost deserted, only a few early morning merchants beginning to set up their stalls. Ilara kept her gaze low, heading directly to the bakery, where the smell of fresh bread was a balm to her soul. With a low voice and trembling hands, she asked for bread, cheese, a little milk, and some dried fruit. The baker, a robust man with tired eyes, accepted the gold coins with discreet surprise. Ilara felt his eyes on her, but maintained her composure, paying the fair price and asking him to wrap everything quickly. Next, she went to the small fabric stall, buying thick blankets and some cloth to mend clothes. Each transaction was a test of her nerves, but the sight of the soft blankets and fresh bread in her hands filled her with a courage she didn't know she possessed. No one questioned her openly, but curious glances and muffled whispers followed her. Ilara felt the weight of the difference, the strangeness of being seen with something other than misery. With her arms laden, she made her way back to the monastery, the sun already beginning to rise in the sky, gilding the ancient stones. With each step, the fear of being followed diminished, replaced by immense relief. Upon reaching the tower, she found Anna and Peter awake, their eyes wide with worry. When they saw her, a smile exploded on their faces and they ran to hug her. Ilara hugged them tightly, feeling the warmth of their bodies and the smell of bread in her hands. "Look what Grandma brought," she exclaimed, unfolding the soft blanket and revealing the bread and cheese. Her grandchildren's eyes shone with a pure, uncontrollable joy. They sat on the clean floor of the tower, devouring the bread with an eagerness that broke Ilara's heart, but also filled it with gratitude. The warm milk, heated in a small pot she had brought, was an indescribable luxury. As she watched her grandchildren eat, Ilara felt a deep peace. The tower, with its stone walls and still cracked ceiling, was no longer just a refuge, but a home beginning to be built with love and sacrifice. The manuscript, still wrapped in its corner, seemed to emit a softer glow now, as if approving the scene of warmth and sustenance. The journey would be long, but with each step, with each broken bread, they were weaving the tapestry of a future where hope was not just a word, but a palpable reality. Ilara knew that the monastery had much more to offer, and they, in turn, had much to restore. Ilara knew that the monastery had much more to offer, and in turn, much to restore. The smell of bread and milk, mingled with the ancient stone, was the aroma of hope. Her grandchildren slept, their faces serene. With gratitude, she picked up the map. The faded lines revealed the water spring and the fertile field, a promise of self-sufficiency, the foundation of their new home. The tower was shelter, the gold, a bridge, but the land would be life. The morning would bring the urgency of exploring these new gifts. At dawn, the monastery awoke with golden rays. Ilara watched Anna and Peter stretch. "My loves, today we have a great adventure," she said, a genuine smile. "We're going to find the spring and the field that will give us food forever." The children's eyes widened. Peter jumped and Anna took the map. "How will we know where to go?" Ilara pointed to the symbols. "This is the monastery, and this path leads where the water sings and the earth waits." Leaving the walls brought anxiety, but necessity was always greater than fear. With the map in hand and anticipation, they left the tower. The search was not easy, the monastery was vast, time had swallowed many paths. They walked through ruins and courtyards full of weeds. Ilara felt the weariness, but Anna and Peter, running ahead with renewed energy, propelled her. "Grandma, look, a flower!" Anna exclaimed. Peter climbed over rubble, imagining himself a knight. Ilara watched them, their stolen childhood being returned. She knelt, consulting the map, aligning the points. The sun was rising and thirst would soon make itself known. It was Peter who found it. Running ahead, he stumbled and fell, but as he got up, his eyes widened. "Grandma, water! There's water here!" Ilara and Anna ran. There, hidden under ferns and moss, a spring gushed forth. The water, clear and fresh, flowed between the stones. Ilara knelt, cupped her hands, and drank. It was the sweetest water she had ever tasted, a liquid miracle that washed away weariness and doubt. Anna and Peter laughed, splashing each other. With the spring found, the fertile field soon revealed itself. The map indicated an area ahead. Ilara could hardly believe it. A clearing protected by leafy trees, with dark, rich soil, inviting cultivation. It had been untouched for centuries. It was perfect. Ilara felt tears well up, this time of triumph. They had water, they had land. They had the foundation to build a life. As her grandchildren explored the clearing, imagining what to plant, Ilara sat, the map in one hand, the glowing manuscript in her mind. The gold and jewels were important, but the spring and the field were the true wealth, the guarantee that they would never go hungry again. However, the book still called to her. She knew she needed to find someone to read it, to unravel the monastery's secrets. The restoration would not only be physical, but also of memory and history. It was a responsibility she embraced with every fiber of her being. The journey was far from over, but with each discovery, with each step, hope rooted itself deeper in their hearts. Hope ran in Elias's veins. The fertile field, the spring, the bread and milk that Arthur and Sophia devoured were the miracle. Yet watching his grandchildren play, their faces pale and feverish, Elias felt a weight. Survival was guaranteed, but the soul of the abandoned village and the healing of his little ones awaited. The manuscript, kept in the tower, pulsed in his memory, a silent call. Elias, without the gift of reading, felt powerless. Who would unravel the words the village yearned to tell? Seeking help outside brought the fear of greed. But the image of Arthur coughing and Sophia with a distant look was a strong incentive. He decided he would go to the nearby village, not just for seeds, but to inquire discreetly about someone who could read. It would be an unpostponable journey. The next morning, before sunrise, Elias kissed the foreheads of Arthur and Sophia, who were sleeping. "Grandpa will be back soon," he whispered. He took some coins and the manuscript, hiding it under his clothes. The walk was long and arduous. Determination propelled him. In the neighboring village, he bought the essentials. In a low voice, he asked an old herb merchant if he knew anyone who understood old writings. "Would The merchant, with a long beard and piercing eyes, looked at him. "There's an old hermit, Sister Agnes, in the hills beyond the forest," he murmured. They say she dedicated her life to deciphering secrets of the past, but she doesn't receive everyone. Elias felt a pang of hope. The forest was dangerous, the hermit a legend. But there was no choice. He thanked him and without hesitation headed for the hills. The journey was exhaustive, the forest dense and silent, but the light of the manuscript seemed to guide him. At dusk, he spotted a small stone cabin, almost swallowed by vegetation. Faint smoke rose from the chimney. With his heart in his throat, Elias knocked. A faint but firm voice told him to enter. Inside, an elderly woman, with hair white as snow and eyes of immense wisdom, sat by candlelight, surrounded by stacks of parchments. It was Sister Agnes. Elias, trembling, took the manuscript from inside his clothes. The golden light of the book illuminated the small room. Sister Agnes's eyes widened. "The manuscript of Eldoria," she whispered, her wrinkled hands reaching out. "I thought it was lost forever." She took the book with reverence, her eyes fixed on the first pages. A heavy silence filled the air, broken only by the crackling of the candle. Then, with a voice that seemed to echo centuries of history, Sister Agnes began to read. "Here lies the truth of Eldoria, the village of healing, built not by stone and mortar, but by faith and the gift of the earth. Its whispers are not of ghosts, but the lament of a forgotten purpose. The spring, the fertile land, the treasure, all was left for the one with a pure heart who would find it, so that the light of healing could be reborn and the afflicted restored." Elias felt a shiver. The healing, his grandchildren, the purpose of the village, the hermit's words were the key, the climax of his search, revealing that Eldoria was not just a refuge, but a place of healing, and that he, Elias, was the instrument to restore this legacy, and perhaps the health of his beloved Arthur and Sophia. Sister Agnes's words echoed in the small room, penetrating Elias's soul like a balm. "The healing, your grandchildren." The phrase hung in the air, laden with a promise he barely dared to believe. His eyes, once clouded with weariness and despair, now shone with a new light, a hope so intense it almost blinded him. He felt a knot in his throat, a mixture of relief and gratitude that left him speechless. Sister Agnes, with a gentle smile, indicated a wooden chair. "Sit, my son, there is much to be understood." Elias obeyed, his legs still trembling from the long journey and the revelation. She leafed through the manuscript with experienced fingers, her eyes scanning the ancient lines. Eldoria was not a monastery, but a refuge of healers, a community dedicated to preserving the knowledge of herbs, waters, and balance with nature. The whispers you heard were not of ghosts, but the echo of an underground river that fed the spring, and the lament of the walls that guarded secrets waiting to be rediscovered. Your grandchildren, with their fever, are sensitive to the energy of the place, but they are also the key to awakening its purpose. She explained that the spring of crystal-clear water was not just for drinking, but possessed rare mineral properties capable of alleviating fevers and strengthening the body. The fertile field, in turn, was the ideal soil for cultivating specific medicinal herbs, whose recipes were detailed in the manuscripts. "It's not magic, Elias," she said, her eyes meeting his with seriousness. "It is the ancestral wisdom of the earth, forgotten by time, but now through you, ready to be reborn." Sister Agnes spent hours reading and explaining, her voice soft but firm, unraveling the secrets of Eldoria. Elias listened attentively, absorbing every word, every instruction. He learned about herbal teas for Arthur's cough, warm baths with infusions for Sophia's fever, and the importance of a rich and pure diet, cultivated from their own land. The manuscript was not just a treasure of gold, but a map to health and life. At dawn, with the sun painting the horizon with soft hues, Elias bid farewell to Sister Agnes. He thanked her with a tight embrace, feeling the old woman's fragility, but also the strength of her spirit. "You are the guardian of Eldoria now, Elias," she said, handing him the manuscript. "Take the healing back to your little ones, and when they are strong, remember, Eldoria's healing is for all who seek it with a pure heart." The journey back to the abandoned village was different. The weariness was still there, but with each step, Elias felt a renewed energy. The fear of greed and misunderstanding had been replaced by an unwavering purpose. He was no longer an impoverished and hopeless grandfather, but the bearer of a legacy, the restorer of a place of healing. Upon spotting the tower, his heart filled with indescribable joy. Arthur and Sophia were sitting near the door, their faces still pale, but their eyes widened when they saw him. Elias ran, embracing them with a strength that came from his soul. "My loves, Grandpa has brought the healing," he whispered, tears streaming down his wrinkled face. But now they were tears of hope. In the days that followed, Elias worked tirelessly. He used the spring water to prepare the teas and baths, following the manuscript's instructions. He planted the seeds he had bought, but also the medicinal herbs that Sister Agnes had described, preparing the fertile soil with reverent care. He cleaned the tower, aired out the rooms, and with the help of Arthur and Sophia, who were already showing signs of improvement, transformed the refuge into a true sanctuary of well-being. Sophia's fever subsided, and her cough calmed. Arthur regained the sparkle in his eyes, and soon both were playing again, their laughter echoing through the tower's walls. Elias watched them, his heart overflowing with gratitude. Eldoria's healing was not an instant miracle, but a process of patience, love, and connection with the earth. Elias knew that the journey of Eldoria's restoration was just beginning. There was much to be done, much to be planted, much to be shared. But the main conflict, the threat to his grandchildren's lives, had been resolved. Hope was no longer a mirage, but a reality that blossomed in the heart of the abandoned village, a testament to a grandfather's unconditional love and the forgotten wisdom of a blessed place. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The village of Eldoria, once a silent echo of the past, now pulsed with renewed life. Arthur and Sophia, with their rosy cheeks and eyes full of vivacity, were the most eloquent proof of the healing Elias had brought. Their laughter, once rare and subdued, now filled the air, echoing among the ancient stones of the tower and spreading across the green fields. Elias watched them play, his heart overflowing with a gratitude that barely fit in his chest. Sophia's fever was a distant memory, and Arthur's cough had completely disappeared. They ran through the field, helping their grandfather harvest the medicinal herbs and vegetables that grew abundantly in the fertile soil. Stories of old Elias and the village of healing began to spread through neighboring settlements, carried by merchants and travelers. At first they were just whispers of hope, but soon they transformed into a constant flow of people seeking relief. Mothers brought their feverish children, elders with chronic pains, and many who simply sought a balm for their weary souls. Elias, with the wisdom of the manuscript and the gentle guidance of Sister Agnes, who occasionally visited him, received everyone with an open heart. He prepared the teas, indicated the baths at the spring, and taught about the importance of a life in harmony with nature. He asked for nothing in return, only that they carry with them the message of hope and respect for the earth. The village of Eldoria began to flourish in a way no one could have imagined. Small cabins were restored, not for permanent dwelling, but as temporary shelters for those who came seeking healing. The fertile field, once a secret, was now cultivated with the help of some visitors who, in gratitude, offered their labor. Elias, Arthur, and Sophia were no longer alone. They were the heart of a small community that formed around Eldoria's generosity. Arthur, with his innate curiosity, helped his grandfather identify the herbs, while Sophia, with her delicacy, tended to the flowers and gardens that began to beautify the village. Elias, once a man bent by the weight of life, now walked with an upright posture, his eyes shining with renewed purpose. He was not just a grandfather, but a guardian, a healer, a link between Eldoria's past and future. With each person, he saw leave with a smile of relief. With each child, he saw play without fever. He felt the confirmation that his journey had been worthwhile. The gold and jewels of the crypt, though still guarded, had become secondary. The true wealth was the life that pulsed in Eldoria, the healing that spread, the love that united everyone. On a sunny afternoon, as the sun set, painting the sky with shades of gold and violet, Elias sat at the entrance of the tower, watching Arthur and Sophia laugh as they chased butterflies. The village around them was a picture of peace and prosperity. The smell of fresh herbs and baking bread hung in the air. He picked up the manuscript, its pages worn, but its content more alive than ever. The story of Eldoria, the village of healing, was no longer a forgotten secret, but a living legend, rewritten each day by a grandfather's love and dedication. Elias smiled, a smile that reached his wrinkled eyes. He had arrived in Eldoria with a heavy heart, fleeing a cruel world, seeking only a refuge for his grandchildren. He found much more than he expected. He found a purpose, an extended family, and proof that hope, when nourished by love and faith, can transform the most desolate ruins into a sanctuary of life. Life there was a testament that, even in the shadows of the past, the light of human connection and overcoming can flourish, weaving a bright and lasting future. Eldoria's legacy was not just about healing bodies, but about restoring souls. And Elias, the grandfather who risked everything, had become the heart of this renewal, a true beacon of hope for all. Eldoria's legacy was not just about healing bodies, but about restoring souls. And Elias, the grandfather who risked everything, had become the heart of this renewal, a true beacon of hope for all. As the years passed, Eldoria's story ceased to be a whisper and became a song sung by many. The village, once forgotten, was now a point of light on the map, attracting not only the afflicted, but also those who sought a purpose, a place to belong. Elias, with his whiter hair and more wrinkled hands, but with eyes still vibrant with wisdom, continued to be the guide. He taught with patience and love the art of cultivating the land, of preparing infusions, and of listening to the secrets that nature whispered. Arthur and Sophia, now teenagers, were his most dedicated apprentices. Arthur, with his grandfather's strength and curiosity, had become a master in cultivating herbs, knowing each plant by name and by its properties. He spent hours in the fertile field, his hands calloused, but his heart light. Sophia, with her delicacy and intuition, had developed a special gift for comforting the sick and preparing baths at the spring. Her touches were gentle, her words a balm. Together, they were the new generation of Eldoria. The promise that the legacy of healing would continue. Sister Agnes, who now visited Eldoria more frequently, watched the village flourish with serene joy. She and Elias spent long afternoons in the tower, the manuscript open between them, discussing new recipes and deepening ancestral knowledge. The old hermit, once solitary, had found in Eldoria a family and a renewed purpose for her vast wisdom. She smiled as she saw the village children playing in the restored ruins, their laughter echoing where silence once reigned. The community of Eldoria grew, but organically, respecting the balance and peace of the place. There was no rush, only the certainty that each new soul that arrived brought with it a story and a new opportunity for healing and connection. Small stone houses, once crumbled, had been rebuilt with collective effort, offering shelter and warmth. The smell of fresh bread and medicinal herbs mingled with the aroma of damp earth, creating an atmosphere of welcome and hope. Elias, in his moments of quietude, sat by the spring, watching the crystal-clear water flow. He thought of his journey, of the nights of hunger and cold, of the fear that consumed him. Now, everything seemed a distant dream. Life had taught him that true wealth was not in the gold of the crypt, but in the resilience of the human spirit, in the strength of family love, and in the generosity of sharing what one has. He had transformed desolation into a sanctuary, not just for his grandchildren, but for all who sought a new beginning. On a clear night, under a starry sky that seemed to embrace the village, Elias gathered Arthur and Sophia and the few residents who had chosen Eldoria as their home. With a voice choked with emotion, he told them the story of how it all began, of the fear and the discovery, of the unwavering faith that propelled him. His eyes shone as he saw their attentive faces, their open hearts. "Eldoria is more than a place," he said, his hands outstretched to the sky. "It is proof that hope never dies, that love can rebuild what the world tries to destroy, and that the deepest healing comes from within, when we connect with each other and with the earth that sustains us." That abandoned village, now a beacon of life, was the living testament of a grandfather who, driven by love, had found not just a refuge, but an eternal purpose.